Good afternoon. Boy, there have been a lot of good discussions today, a lot of good topics. My presentation might be a little less technical. Well, sort of technical. That's what we're all here about. I really was excited to hear all the different solutions that are being that are out there, and the comments from people, because everybody's got their different perspective. I'm Norm. Today I'm not representing a company. I'm a consultant. I've been working with everybody for a long time. I've been exposed to a lot of different environments. I've been hearing lots of fun things. The predictive dialing adventure. One business case that you didn't bring up is are people that don't pay their bills, don't pay their cell bills or credit card bills. There's thousands and thousands of those, and you've got companies that do predictive dialing out there. We can talk about that offline. Again, telcos hate that. Other areas that were brought up had to do with sending pushes out, AP&S through Apple's push notification service down to mobile devices. To how do you get an incoming call going to a mobile device when it's in your pocket? Push is great. What was presented was an interesting, registration coming up, and then an invite going down. That's certainly very, one way you can do that with OpenSIPS. Another idea that you might need some support outside of OpenSIPS would be to send the same push payload down, but with a little extra information so that the cell phone or mobile device, doesn't have to be a cell phone, it could be a tablet of some sort, mobile device sends an invite back up. So you got the invite that comes in, you send a push, another invite comes in, you bridge the call together, and voila, you don't need the registration aspect of that. The registration can sometimes be an adventure when you're dealing with mobile devices and pushes, things like that. So we've heard lots of different angles. We've got lots of different ways people put the systems together. What I was thinking about as I was listening to these presentations is that there's no necessarily right way of doing anything. We've got just the last presentation, Grasshopper, was great. I mean, here's an example of how, through their business needs, they set up an environment to work and to survive in their business climate. We had lots of people suggesting alternative solutions, and that's the beauty of it, is that there's definitely always more than one way to skin a cat, and oftentimes there's more than one right solution. You might argue there's the best solution, and then, we can't do the best solution because of whatever reason. So we fall back to solutions that are maybe not optimal, but work for our business case and our parameters. So I was really loving it, listening to all the different ways people are putting their systems together. And again, I'd really like to say there's no right or wrong way. There's lots of different alternatives, and they all come with trade-offs, pluses and minuses. So I'm going to talk a little bit about advanced SIP routing. Actually, it's really not advanced SIP routing. I'll do a little maybe SIP 101 for routing.
Stop toying with us, Norman.
For a little bit. And then we'll talk about some of the modules in OpenSIPS that allows you to route. And it's from what I've heard from the audience, it's everybody's going to already know all this. So this is going to be 101. It's going to be a little refresher. But the point is that I'm going to go over 4 different routing modules in OpenSIPS, kind of at a high level. And the point is that there's not necessarily one right or wrong way of doing anything. You can do routing inbound from the carrier to OpenSIPS, or from OpenSIPS out to free switches, or that other kind of PBX. You can use probably and arguably any of these modules, and they all work, and you can make it work based on your business case, your needs, and your requirements. So I'm not proposing or saying this is any one perfect solution for everything. There is no one size fits all. But the beauty of OpenSIPS, and as Bogdan stated this morning, there are 134 modules. Heck, you can mix and match until you can mix and match modules until you get the solution that works for your particular business case. As I said, I do consult. I've been exposed to a lot of different environments, and I will guarantee that there are no 2 environments that are exactly the same. So with 134 different modules, you really do have the ability to mix and match and to provide, produce the best solution for your particular environment. So we'll go back to SIP 101. SIP routing, you've got via headers and you've got route headers. And no, I'm not going to get in depth, and I don't want to get any religious arguments about the nuances of routing. Just consider this very, very high level. we got via headers, and via headers are when you have requests, when the client sends a request, adds a via header to the request. Every proxy and every node in between, as it passes the SIP message along, it adds its own via, and eventually the message will get to its destination. Route headers, the other routing header in SIP. In the SIP world, force routing through a particular proxy, and subsequent requests from your endpoint from one client out to the other side will follow the route headers. So basically, SIP routing consists of just via headers and route headers. And as I said, I'm not going to get too in-depth into it. And so to recap, requests, as the request goes out, an invite goes out, they follow route headers, responses follow via headers. That is SIP 101. I'm sure many of you may already know that and can get into it.
What's the difference between loose routing and strict routing?
What did I say? I said I'm not going to get in depth. I'm not going to keep this below like SIP 101. Loose routing and strict routing, we're not going to go into that, you know. I think you can look at the RFC, or you can look at one of the many tutorials online that I'm sure everybody's already been to. It's been explained, you know, it's been explained 100,000 times. Just the idea is, you know, SIP routing is you've got your invite, for example, a phone call that starts here, ends there, and it gets routed. It's similar to IP routing. You've got, you know, you're looking for a web page, it starts here, ends here, and you just route your way along. And again, I'm purposely keeping things high level because it's late in the afternoon, everybody's probably burned out, and their brain cells are probably whatever. So I'm just going to go over very high level the 4 different routing modules in OpenSIPS. There's ways to route without even using these. You can use a forward. You know, you can route without the module. But if you're trying to be a little more advanced, you can use these guys. Carrier route, load balancer, the dispatcher, and dynamic routing. Probably in order of, I don't know, maybe preference or my particular idea of how I organize this. Carrier routing module is an older module. I'm not sure it's even actively maintained by the developer any longer. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't use it. It does work. I know sites that are using this with OpenSIPS, and it works. You know, you set it up. If it solves your business need and you're not having problems with it, go for it. It provides routing, load balancing, blacklisting. In OpenSIPS, I'm not saying that it's preferred or not preferred, but it's not installed by default. And the great OpenSIPS control panel, the web GUI, does not have support for it. So, not saying you should or shouldn't use it, but take it as you may. It does perform longest prefix matching. Everybody here is in telco, and we all know what longest prefix matching is. It's if you ever try to do it by hand in your database, you find, wow, databases, or most databases don't come out of the box with support for this. It's a little bit of a pain. Where, does anybody not know what longest prefix matching is? I think I have another slide that will talk about it. But carrier route also strips and adds prefixes and suffixes. I think it's actually one of the few modules that actually will add a suffix. I'm not sure that I've actually used that or could see a need for it, unless maybe you're trying to route to an extension. You get to some place and you've got an extension you want to route to. But it does have that support. And they use probabilities to try to load balance so they keep track of how often they're sending requests to one destination or another destination. We're talking about longest prefix matching. It is an algorithm. Actually, I think that if you wiki it, you'll see that longest prefix matching comes up under routing protocols. So this first, I guess historically, routers had to deal with matching IP addresses. In the telephone world, we basically used prefix matching to pull entries out of the least cost routing table. So, for example, you've got domestic calls to a country may cost some amount. A cell phone call to that same country may cost a lot more. And so you want to make sure that if possible you can route out via, the PSTN number that the number that you're using correctly. Does anybody not know what longest prefix matching is? As I said, this is kind of 101 stuff. The next module that I was going to talk about is load balancer. It's pretty lightweight. It does provide balancing based on load. The load balancer can be configured via the control panel, and does take a single database table to manage, to put its control information in. It's pretty lightweight, it's pretty fast, it works. But because it's lightweight, because it's super fast, it doesn't have a lot of features like the prefix matching or adding or deleting prefixes or suffixes or things like that. But the load balancer module is very useful. Here we go. Did I miss yes, I did miss a slide. As the load balancer module comes with just a single function call, so if you're not into scripting and you want this thing to work, and you're afraid to use it, don't sweat. You've just got a single function call. The one, again, based on your business case, the counts for the load balancer are kept in memory. They're not kept in a database or any persistent store. So if you're not saving those counts some other way and you reboot the server, you will lose your counts. Go ahead.
You can, starting with 1.8, can keep the counters in an expand on NoSQL database.
Now we can keep the counters starting with 1.8. So again, that was just a small item I mentioned, and it's great. It's been addressed. And again, it's fast, it's quick, and the idea with this particular module is it does the routing really fast, and you can crank it up to some pretty high loads. Again, if you're a stateless proxy and you're not stateful, you can really use the load balancer in a stateless proxy to just crank calls out. Not like we're sending lots of robo-dialed calls out. But if you're going to do that, crank it out.
Load balancer actually uses dialog, right? And it's not really state. Lots of load balancers.
Does the load balancer require the dialog module?
Yes.
Yeah, because basically the load is the number of ongoing calls per destination.
Okay.
So
It's like creating a profile.
Well, you can.
it is.
Go ahead.
I don't think it's really. I mean, it's extremely efficient load balancer. We tested but it's not really like a stateless proxy. Stateless proxy is just like.
Right, we can just store it out.
Right.
Okay. Point taken. The next module, probably in terms of complexity, is the dispatcher module. This is also in the control panel. The dispatcher module does give you a lot more flexibility, so it's a little bit heavier weight. It gives you the ability to hash over various parts of the SIP URI or various parts of the fields that you'll have when you're trying to determine where to send a packet. Because it's got a little more, got more work it can do. It's a little bit heavier, but it's very flexible. And again, we've heard lots of folks that are using this. I'm sure they know more about the nuances than maybe I do. But it can be configured via file or a database. So if you want to not have database calls, it's possible to set the dispatcher up using just a configuration file and MI commands to manage it. Nice thing with the dispatcher module is it's got this probing mechanism so that you can determine, so that OpenSIPS can determine if a destination, a carrier, or if you're dispatching down to, let's say, a three-switch server, if that server's gone away, if your destination's gone away, it can probe that destination and mark it out of service. When the destination comes back, it can mark it in service again. Adds a lot of flexibility, and if you're really doing some serious routing, anything more than something really lightweight, you can use the dispatcher Again, Bogdan, am I wrong with this last item? It doesn't strip or append prefixes or suffixes.
That's true.
So if that's something you need, you may not want to use a dispatcher, or you may want to put that logic in your OpenSIPS config and use a dispatcher, or you may want to use the dynamic routing module, which is probably the heaviest weight, the most feature-packed routing module that OpenSIPS that I'm talking about here. But it's very, it's very slick. It does allow you to use multiple criteria to select which destination you're going to route your message to. It has prefix, caller. You can route by prefix, caller, group, time, priority. It does take 4 tables. It can take 4 tables. You don't need to use all 4 of them based on how you're calling the dynamic routing module. It takes a little bit to get your head around. It's not hard, but it really does give you a lot of flexibility. A lot of folks here in the room are using it, and it does work pretty well. Probably the most complex form of using the dynamic routing module is the do routing call, which uses the groups, rules, carriers, and gateways tables. So if you're really setting everything up soup to nuts, you can really have a lot of flexibility with just the do routing call and the 10 parameters, maybe 6 parameters that it takes. If you want a little simpler routing, you can just route to carriers. The carriers, it uses the carriers and gateways table. Or if you just want to use your gateways, you can use the route to gateway. I probably listed this in reverse order of complexity. The dynamic routing module, the gateways are really where you're defining your IP endpoints to the far end, let's say to level 3 or Verizon. The carriers could be Verizon, and you may have multiple gateways out to Verizon. So you may have multiple gateway entries for a carrier like Verizon. If you want to call the carrier Verizon and not call the carrier, depends on your business case what you would call it. Some places may call carrier, I don't know, PSTN or national or international or something else. Again, the way that you use this is based on your business and your business decisions. So you got the gateways, which are the IP endpoints. You've got the next level up, which are the carriers, which consist of multiple IP endpoints. And then you've got groups where you can group, or the rules where you can use prefix matching, time-based matching, a whole host of other matching criteria to figure out which carrier, which gateway you want to go out. Gives you a lot of flexibility. Again, one size does not fit all. Time-based routing, I'm not sure I've seen a client that has required the need for time-based routing, though I can absolutely understand the requirement. I'm sure there are businesses out there that need time-based routing, and this is perfect. It provides it. So, again, these are tools in the toolbox. Probably the first thing I was thinking this morning when I was listening to things is that, what's the cliche? If all you've got is a hammer, then everything's a nail. The idea that what I'm trying to do is present different routing modules. So based on your routing needs that you alone will know for your business, one of the different modules, may get you 80% there, 90% there, or 100% there. The OpenSIPS control panel, I would absolutely, I remember the days when there was no OpenSIPS control panel. Those were good days as well. But the control panel has come along quite nicely. As I said, you've got the dispatcher, the dynamic routing, and the load balancer modules all built into it. Or interfaces here when you're trying to think through and organize your carriers or your back-end free switch clusters or whatever the case may be that you're setting up. So I would definitely, if you haven't installed it, has everybody installed it at least? Used it? One person. Oh, come on. Nobody else has used it. Check out the control panel. It's worth it. Are there bugs with it? Absolutely. Does every single feature? I'm not sure I've been able to make every single feature work 100%, but the routing entries, these routing modules are configurable and they work great. And I would definitely recommend using it. Possible use cases, your mileage will vary. As we've heard people say, the dispatcher module can be used for routing to carriers or actually free switch clusters. I would say, I would think maybe for me, again, it depends on the business case, but I see routing to the free switch clusters a really good use of the dispatcher module. I wholly support that. Dynamic routing, again, the route to carriers. I guess you could, Bogdan was talking about this morning, using dynamic routing to route inbound, which absolutely could be done, that's not a problem. The load balancer, you can again use to route out to carriers or to free switch clusters. Again, it's not one size fits all. You got to look at your business needs, your company, and figure out, look at the tools that you've got, and then use the tool that's appropriate or that's best for your needs. Does anyone have any questions? No questions? Comments? Comments?
I couldn't figure out what's the groups table for.
The groups table. Again, the groups table is a way that you can have a user log in. Well, a registered user, you get a user and domain, right? And that user can belong to a group. So you could be setting up multiple companies, like white labeling, and everybody for one company is company group, company A. And then you've got guys over here, and they all log in, and they're group company B. So when the routing happens, and you use the dynamic routing module, and somebody from over here comes in, they're going to go out with group A routing tables, or the group associated with group A, and it's going to flow down to the carriers and or gateways defined. Group B will get perhaps the same routing tables, perhaps just different routing tables, probably different, which is why you'd have two groups. You may have people that pay more for higher quality routes, people that pay less for lower quality routes. Tier 1 carriers, Tier 2 or Tier 3 carriers, they may be associated with different groups. So that's just an example. No. Go ahead.
That's a real question. Can we mix them together like you did?
You can absolutely. And I did have it is possible. I would highly recommend against it. My opinion, again, one size doesn't always fit all. But I've had a case where there was a situation of mixing the, what was it? It was the dynamic routing and the dispatcher modules together. And I would, for the same call, like you're using for the same call, not routing, not using like the load balancer for outbound and the dispatcher for inbound. For an outbound call, I think what your question is, for an outbound call, for example, would you use more than one? And yes, you can. You have to, obviously, you have to be very careful with side effects. And I would probably recommend that. Bogdan, do you have a comment about using more than one of these routing modules for an outbound call?
Technically, it's perfectly possible. It's, let's say, depends on what exactly you're trying to do.
Let's say you use dynamic routing, and then the outcome is a set of destinations that you would use load balancing to load balance those destinations.
What you can do is like use dynamic routing just to, let's say, do the prefix matching and get a group to do the load balance movement, right?
Yeah.
And then take the group and go into the load balancer to do actual, balancing based on the load. So So you can do something like that, definitely.
While it's possible, there's enough complexity with some of these more complex routing mechanisms. I mean, a dynamic routing module uses 4 tables. I mean, there's enough complexity right there. If you now add a different routing module where you're doing other routing with other tables, you've now multiplied your complexity. Is that a good or bad thing? Again, it's based on your business case. But when you add more than one of these routing modules, you will increase your complexity. You know, you got to rob Peter to pay Paul, as the saying goes. So that was it. Thank you, everybody.